At the end of every school year, my father would come to pick me up from my mother's house. We would begin the hot station wagon pilgrimage. My album, that's Arabic for father. First stop, Eastern Market, Detroit, Michigan, the country's largest farmers market. Blocks before we would come off the freeway to go to the farmers market, there was a building. On the building, you would see a cow. The hair was made from spinach, and his ears was made from bananas. And as a kid, it was like the circus, a carnival. Well, we were on the hot station wagon pilgrimage, and the windows were always open. In the summer, it was always Ramadan, so you couldn't eat a thing. But as you pulled into the market, there were sights, and there were smells, and there were sounds. You would smell kebabs cooking. You would smell peanuts roasting and caramelized. You could smell the sugar. We would stop at all of the vendors. My father knew all of the vendors at the farmer's market. We would go into Rocky Peanut Shop, and we would get all the seasonings for his halal lamb sausage. You could hear the saxophones playing on corners, the congos. Roses, roses, get your roses, roses, $2 roses. That's before we entered the halal poetry shop. In this poetry shop, there was live turkeys, ducks, rabbits, geese. And at 8 years old, I would learn how to butcher. Be cautious, be careful, pull the feathers out while the chickens were hot. Don't cut the gallbladder, because the gallbladder would make the meat sour. Open the gizzards. At the end of the day, we would package live ducks and geese and chickens. We would put them in plastic. They were carefully wrapped in butcher paper, and we would tie them with twine. My uncle, he would take them and place them in a cooler packed with ice. And then we would take the hot station wagon pilgrimage to restaurants. Our first stop, Chung's. Chung's was a Cantonese Chinese restaurant. And as we would walk through those back doors, they would say, Ni hao, ni hao, ni hao, Firdaus. Ni hao is Chinese for hello. Firdaus is my middle name. My first name is Hebrew. And my father would never call me by my first name, it's only my Arabic name. And as I would walk in, it was a family-owned restaurant. They would walk me to every single station in the restaurant. Imagine, an 8-year-old kid walking through the back of a Chinese restaurant where they would take me to every station. This is where I would smell garlic and lemongrass for the first time. There was steam running through the restaurants, and the ducks would hang, and the chickens would hang, and they would make roasted duck. I butchered those ducks. This was amazing. That's our food. My father had opened Detroit's first halal poetry shop. I loved the way the Chung's family restaurant would make me feel when I would walk in. They would walk me to the front. I would get to see the peppers on the table, Szechuan. I would see the sauces on the table. And they always treated me like family. You see, food is a passport to the world. Second stop on the hot station wagon pilgrimage. Georgia. As we would travel to Georgia, we would enter a dirt road. My father would call this the Ibrahim way. The Ibrahim way was sustainable, soil support. We planted everything. See, I came from very humble means. And when I say humble, let's describe this. On this farm, there was no running water. There were no electricity. We had kerosene lamps. We also had seeds, chickens, ducks, goats, and there was always one cow. Sorry, Bruno. There was always one cow until September. But what I did learn was how to plant a seed, how to cultivate a seed, how to harvest. I learned soil support at an early age. And this was totally incredible. Like I said, during the summers, there was Ramadan. So during the daytime, you didn't eat. But at the end of the night, there's a meal called iftar dinner. Iftar is when you break fast. And as a community, you go to the mosque and you eat with everyone. This was my first glance at communal dining. In this mosque, I would meet people from Somalia, Quebec, Guatemala, India. Oh my goodness. It was like the United Nations smorgasbord. There were lentils, baba ganoush, hummus, pita bread, and the best biryani that you ever tasted. The rice was always fluffy and perfect. They would gently put the curry goat on top. And there were platters that were about 24 inches in round. 5 to 6 people would eat out of each platter. Communal dining at its finest. This is where I learned about so many different cultures, so many different nationalities. You see, food is a passport to the world. And as a child, you didn't talk much, but you listened. They talked about their grandmothers and their cultures, their families, and the foods that they ate. I felt as though, wow, all of these people were my family members. One year, my father took me back to my mother's house. And when we returned, my mother said that we would relocate. And when we were relocated, we were going to move to Detroit, Michigan, the place where the farmer's market was. We would move only 3 blocks away from this farmer's market. But at the time, Detroit was extremely food insecure. There weren't very many supermarkets. And my mother said to me, Alicia, I finally have a job opportunity where I'm going to show you the world. No, but it won't be on Amtrak. It won't be on a plane. We are going to travel the world through food. Well, I was perplexed. Well, how are we going to do that without a plane or a train or an automobile? My parents met in Brooklyn. My mother didn't even know how to drive. She created a little kid passport for me. First stop, Pegasus Taverna, Greektown. And as I entered this restaurant, on the ceiling there were grape rings. On the walls there were vines. I loved this place so much, and as we sat, they would greet us with water, Greek bread, olive oil, and butter. And my mother would say, "Pour the olive oil on your plate." Pegasus would become the first restaurant that I would ever work at 6 years later. This is where I started my hospitality journey. What I learned at Pegasus was, between breaks, there was something called a family-style dinner. And at this family-style dinner, before dinner would actually start, everyone would sit together. We would do communal-style dining. You see, food is a passport passport to the world. At this restaurant, people from Russia, Chaldea, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, they all worked there. And we would sit down and have a meal, and they would talk about their parents and their grandparents and the way that they lived, and I was all ears. Pegasus was a place where I learned a lot about love and community. They treated me very kindly. So when I left Pegasus, which was my first restaurant in hospitality, these were my expectations. Well, I traveled a lot of places, worked at a lot of restaurants, and now, with 15 years under my belt, I would move to Chicago. Chicago is almost like the restaurant capital of the world. I was excited. I had got a handwritten note from a celebrity chef that said, "Come and join me." And when I got to Chicago, I never had the opportunity to join him. And as I began putting out resumes and sending out resumes, the world had become very digital. Sometimes I would walk in, I thought I had the best restaurant in the world. I thought I had the best resume in the world. But what I learned was, after 15 years of hospitality, a lot of people were not ready for a black chef with an Arabic name to run their restaurant. So it became very hard for me. For years, I could not land a job. I went through a state of depression. I couldn't get up, I couldn't eat, I couldn't talk. And one day, I got up and just started going to soup kitchens. I would volunteer at soup kitchens. In the soup kitchens, after we would cook, we would also talk to the people. Very much like we did at Pegasus, very much like we did at the mosque. And I learned so much about people and hardships, and it was so innovative to me. Everyone goes through challenges. Everyone passed through the challenges. At the soup kitchen, that's where I would land my very first private dining gig. Because a lot of the people that actually volunteered were people that had a substantial amount of time on their hands. So they volunteered in different places. When I got a new job, and I was very excited about this sous chef position, I actually left that job to go work for a workforce development project. Here, I would teach kids how to cook, how to interview, all of the things that you want to do to be successful. From there, I started thinking back on Pegasus and what Pegasus actually meant. The wings of a Pegasus meant to overcome earthly expectations. So I went to my community, and I realized within my own community, there was one area that they made me full insecure. Well, what can I do about that? I know how to plant seeds. I know how to butcher. So I would create from that logo an area for kids to learn how to grow, how to harvest, and learn how to cook the food that we grow. Right before the pandemic, everything would begin to shut down. And what I realized, because I worked in areas that had so much food insecurity, so many of these people and children would not have a meal. I came up with something called Kids with Coworkers. Kids with Coworkers, I looked on Facebook one day and it said, "Parents, we want you to tell us something that your kid is doing right now," because everyone was locked in the house together. You will see things like, "My kid is standing on the couch, they're screaming." Let's label them insubordinate. So I love the fact that now you have parents at home with kids. I call this Kids with Coworkers. I partner with organizations in my community. Some of them were organizations that taught kids how to grow. Some were workforce development organizations. And what I wanted to do was serve people with dignity. I wanted to create soil to fork meals that were delivered to people so that no one was put at risk. Well, I was worried about my babies. I didn't actually know if these children, so many of them that received free lunch, would actually have a meal. So we created, those are my littles. We created farm-to-table meals that will go to homes twice a day, some for adults and some for parents. From this, we actually did 80,000 meals. It was pretty cool. Online, I did chef camps. We would deliver the food to people's homes so that kids didn't have to worry about it. Nothing cost more than $3. I wanted to make sure that kids had their pasta, their olive oil, their water, and at home, we could look in this computer and say, yes, chef, no, chef. Are you guys with me? So, I wanted to show them that food was an entryway to discover the world. So we went through Greece, we went through Italy, we went through China, just like I did at Pegasus and Charles. And we created something that was a sustainable system. Now, I work in gardens around the country. I talk to farmers about food, and I'm cultivating relationships between farmers and chefs. I ask you guys, have you ever sat down with someone that you've never eaten with? At my supper club, if you buy a ticket, you're going to sit with people that you've never eaten with. Have you ever heard their story? Have you ever thought about sitting down with someone that you actually don't know? The beauty of it is, you'll find out how much you actually have in common. Because food is a passport to the world. Thank you.